Hey there, Tamers, and welcome to There Can Only Be One. This is a video explaining what the winter holiday event for Digimon is, and as always, I'm Regina, or Regigglypuff, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. So Bandai made the official announcement to host their winter holiday event, and they added a special set of rules for this event, calling it Highlander. The event itself runs from December 6th to January 31st, which is a really long time for a special event. But if we're going to be honest here, with the holidays, the end of the year, and then nationals happening in early January, it's really nice to have a unique event without any sort of product attached to it, especially since the special limited set, or LM, is supposed to release on the 13th, which is when we finally get Scrambles. I'm so excited for that. You guys have no idea. But anyway, back to the holiday event. So participation for this event is a pack that contains 3 cards. It'll be a Biomon, a Palmon, and a Gomamon, well, their respective tamers, to help to complete the set from last year's winter event that had the Tentomon, the Patamon, and Gabumon, and the winner Agumon. And this year's winner is going to be the Kari and Gatomon. So we're going to get all 8 of the chosen children with their respective Digimon partners, and I'm not gonna lie, the art on this is like super cute, and I kind of need a playset of both the Palmon and the Biomon just for my decks, so I'm really excited for this. Now, what exactly is Highlander, and why the heck is it called that? Those of you who play a card game called Magic the Gathering might know it as EDH, or Elder Dragon Highlander, now colloquially known as Commander. But the term Highlander itself comes from the 1986 movie of the same name, where basically a bunch of immortals fight for a prize and only one of them can win and survive. It was adopted into the Elder Dragon Highlander format, with Elder Dragon referencing some of the earliest character creatures in Magic storyline, which, big surprise, are dragons, and then Highlander, where the tagline for the movie itself is "There can only be one." Hence why only one copy of cards outside of basic lands are allowed in the deck. This leads us to the winter holiday event. Digimon Highlander is basically the same concept. There can only be one copy of any card in your deck. The site does outline this as well. So it says, players must use a deck constructed to Highlander specifications. This means there cannot be more than one copy of the same card in the deck. The Digi-Egg deck and the main deck cannot contain more than one copy of a card with the same card number. Even cards that have the direction up to 50 cards with the same card number can be included in the deck, will be limited to one copy only, and banned cards are not permitted in the deck. So because they specify card number and not the card name, you can run multiple Digimon with the same name. For example, you can run multiple different Agumons as long as they are all from different sets or they have a different card number in the bottom. That means you can run like a starter Agumon, you can run an EX1 Agumon, but that bottom like little right thing that says like EX or starter and stuff like that that indicates where the set is from, as long as those are all different, you're allowed to run cards of the same name. Even your egg deck, though, does have to follow that rule. And if we're using the Agumon example again, hey, guess what? There's like a billion Koromon out there, so I think you're fine on eggs, right? And also, because Eosmon exists and this feels like a personal attack, the rule of more than one copy is allowed on the Eosmon text is not allowed for this event. And banned cards are still banned cards. They are banned for a reason, and we all know what those reasons are for, and even the one copy of them inside of a deck would not be fun to play, right? But that's basically it for what a Highlander event is. So I think there's a couple different deck types that you can build for a Highlander format. I'm going to call the first ones the Protagonist decks, and I actually think that they're the ones that have the strongest potential in this format. I'm calling them Protagonist decks because they'll feature the main Digimon in each of their respective seasons, so I'm talking Digimon like Agumon, Vmon, and Gyomon. So these 3 specifically have a lot of cards printed in their respective lines across all of the Digimon main sets, the EX sets, and the starter decks. Honestly, you're kind of spoiled for choice in choosing like the cards that you want to cut out that are considered like the bad ones for their lines, because there's a lot of Agumon out there, there's a lot of Greymon out there, there's a lot of War Greymon out there, and not all of them are good, but you have a little bit more choice in those sort of protagonist cards than you do in a lot of other sets. So is this energy gonna feel a little bit weird? Yeah, but that's what Highlander is about, right? And honestly, I don't think it's gonna hurt that much because the base power of most of these decks are still gonna be pretty strong. Like if you think about it, a Vmon Armor Rush deck actually wouldn't be a super terrible idea because Vmon has a lot of ways to search out all of like the cards in its line. And there's a lot of like good armor cards that you could use for that sort of secondary level of the deck. So Honestly, I kind of think that protagonist decks have a really strong standing in this, and it's really just because of the way that Bandai has sort of built the card game itself to help support it. Will I build a protagonist deck? Probably not, and that's mostly just because I don't know where half of my cards would be for a protagonist deck, and I don't feel like looking for them. So it's more out of laziness than it is actually trying to win this event. So this next set of decks I'm kind of calling the attribute-based decks. And by attribute-based decks, I mean things like D-Brigade or stuff like that you would find in the Loomlord family, which is things like plant, vegetation, fairy, and then things like sea animal or things like that category. So these are going to be decks that don't really have a clear evolution line, but they have a family of cards that you can use to search things out and build from there. They might have to do a little bit more tinkering to make it seem smooth, especially for your top end. But for decks like D-Brigade, honestly, there's been such like crazy groundwork for things like D-Brigade already that it doesn't seem that difficult to have to try to build off of that, especially when there's like 16 Command-Dramon level 3s. So I think the best way to build these sort of decks is kind of look at like the family of cards that you're trying to find. So if we're going off of like the Bloom Lord idea, right? You're looking at fairy, vegetation, plant, things like that. And for me, that would mean sort of meshing it together with a Rosemon deck, because that way you'll have a lot more cards to be able to search for, and there's actually a decent amount of level 6s that you could find in that, and a decent amount of level 5s. Like that green deck was a menace for the longest time as well. You can actually also do bugs. Bugs would work too, because you can find insectoids like crazy. So I actually think like those type of things are pretty decent. There's actually a lot of support for decks like that, which is why we call things like bug decks or plant decks or D-Brigade decks, or I guess Digipolice is what we're going to call it now. You could honestly, you'd be surprised at what you could find for decks like these. And this is probably the type of deck that I'm going to go for. And all cards on the table, it's mostly just because I have the concept of a lot of these decks already built in my deck boxes, and it would be a lot easier for me to go ahead and break those apart and then put them together. So I'm actually probably leaning towards this sort of idea for my own deck. Lastly, the decks that can be built around a theme would probably be the last sort of decks that I'm going to be looking at. So this is something like maybe Source Strip or hybrids. And honestly, it feels a little bit weird to think of them in terms of that, because usually they have like other ways of being more powerful. Hybrids are still just going to be powerful no matter what, but something like Source Strip would actually be sort of devastating to play against, because there's a lot of incidental Source Strip cards across the years that you could put into a deck. It's just become really, really strong in recent sets. But the neat thing is that you can look at old cards and be like, oh yeah, all of these do some form of when digivolving or when played, you strip the top source of the bottom source, and then things with no sources can't attack. There's actually a lot more of those cards out there than you would probably realize. And honestly, like, you could build an entire deck about that and ruin somebody's day. You could build around themes of like blockers or mill, things that might be like, oh yeah, on their own they're not like a super great archetype because there's no place for them in the main like format for Digimon. But in a Highlander format, there's actually a lot of different ways that you could build themes that you probably haven't really thought about before, but could be expanded upon for a one of format. So this probably isn't going to be a deck like type that I'm going to be looking at, but if I did and I wanted to, I would probably go with Source Strip, because Source Stripping is annoying in Digimon, and I hate every single time I have to play against somebody like that. Source Stripping has just always been the bane of my existence. My Jesmon into Atami First Check players will know my pain and understand exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah. So, in conclusion, honestly, I just love formats like this. I love unique formats where you can find ways for cards that might not normally get the spotlight, and I think it's a really fun and creative way to deck build. Like I said, I'm personally leaning towards a plant deck, but I might also just build Rookie Rush because there's a lot of 2-drop rookies, and you can always run my favorite card, which is Spiral Masquerade. You guys, it always just comes back to Rookie Rush. But I kind of interested to see what my friends are going to bring. Every single one of us has like a different sort of idea of what we want to bring to Highlander, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people come up with. I do think there's going to be a lot of Agumon decks out there. It's probably going to be the easiest one to build, or like just Vmon decks. Like Vmon just has so many freaking cards, right? But the fun part about this is the fact that it's a longer event, which means that if stores do host it over the full length of the time, or like multiple stores do, they can always take a break from your regular format to play a unique deck where you don't have to worry about how many more copies of like a card you have left in your deck. You already saw the only copy you'll ever see. I mean, we so often build our decks around full playsets that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how this shapes up to be. And honestly, I hope it becomes a popular format and that people still implement it because it's such a fun and unique take on Digimon. But like I said, it's gonna be a fun month for it, hopefully. And that's really gonna be it for me. I'm gonna be in the lab testing out decks to seeing what clicks for me and seeing what my friends are posting for their deck list to see what I might net deck from them and being like, yeah, this seems like fun. I honestly hope that you have fun at your holiday event. And here's a reminder that if you don't need your Biomons or Palmons, I know someone who could use them. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Let me know how your holiday event goes and what deck you ended up bringing because I might just borrow your ideas if it sounds really fun. So thanks and have a great day.